99% of coaches have a setting process that sucks. And this is what I see as one of the biggest bottlenecks when it comes to scaling to 20K, 30K, 50K, even 100K months, especially if most of your traffic comes from, let's say, Instagram, and you're relying on actually having conversations with people to book in sales calls and obviously get sales and make money, right? Because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day how good your traffic is. If your setting process sucks, you'll burn through leads, you'll waste money, and ultimately you'll burn out, right? And most people, they're stuck in this cycle of getting a setter on, he's not really performing, they have to get a new guy, and it's just keeps them in this constant, loop of trying to find a good setter when it doesn't really, work. So in this video, I'm just gonna break down the stuff that we do with our setters to make sure that we get setters that perform every single time. So we don't have to go through this endless loop of getting new setters and onboarding and everything like that. So I'll give you the full system, because one good setter can change your business in literally just a matter of weeks. So like I said, I'll break all of this down in just a second. But first of all, I want to show you an example. So this is one of our clients, Cospra, that we got on a few weeks ago. And he had this exact problem, right? He was running ads to his IG. He was posting a lot of content, doing everything correct basically, but he was barely booking in any calls. And he was even in a program where they're teaching ads, right? So he had mentorship when it came to ads and everything. And, the ads were crushing everything, but he didn't really book in any calls. And he'd been running through I don't even know how many, but a bunch of appointment setters in the months leading up to us starting to work together. And as he said himself, it was the biggest issue for him to scale, right? So the stuff that I'm about to show you is the exact system we put in place to get him his first appointment setter that was actually crushing, right? And as a result, obviously filling up his calendar, as you can see over here, extremely happy with the setter. Obviously the setter is crushing it. The ad or the ROAS currently is at 10.2 for revenue and 5.2 for cash. And keep in mind, this is just 2 weeks in, right? So this is going to drastically increase over the next few, weeks and months. And, just getting literally clients, multiple clients every single week, and just having a calendar where he doesn't feel stressed about not having enough sales calls and everything. So as you can see over here, we had a 13K day the other day, 5K collected, and some of these guys are going to be closing over the next few days and whatever. And as you can see, just filling up his calendar for, even the next week. And this is also one of our clients, Joe. He had a 22K week last week. Again, all because of him having a process in place when it came to appointment setting to be able to leverage all the traffic that he's getting to his IG, right? Because this is literally make it or break it. Everything is basically funneling back into the DMs. If you don't have a setter that is crushing it, if you have a setter that misses follow-ups, doesn't have a proper system in place for actually, doing his work every single day, you don't have the proper onboarding process to set expectations and all these kinds of things, you're going to be struggling to find a good setter, and just basically having a process in place where a setter can actually crush it. This has also been a problem for us, right? So it's just made us having to really find a system that works. So when we place a setter, we can be super confident in the fact that he's going to be performing and he's going to actually deliver results for our clients. And this is literally the entire thing. And I can promise you, if you've had issues with the setting in the past, this is going to be one of the most valuable videos that you watch all year, or at least, this year. We're almost in 2026, so it's a joke. But anyway, let's get into it. So this is kind of the process most coaches go through, right? So you need a setter. You ask somebody about a setter. Maybe you're in the program. Maybe you know somebody that, does coaching, whatever. You get 1 to 2 setter reaching out, maybe even more. And you get promised the world, of course, on an interview. You don't really have a proper, what do you even ask these guys? Okay, this guy seems legit. Let's get him on. You get him on, and 2 weeks in, he's barely booked any calls. You found out that he's actually super lazy. He complains about the lead quality, and then you have to go through the process again and find a new setter. That's the most typical way that it goes, right? And if you have this issue, or if that's your current process, or at least something similar, then you probably need a better system where you can know for a fact that you can source really good setters. So where do you actually find talent? How do you get more applications so you can kind of pick and choose instead of having to go with a guy because it's, one of two and he's the best one? And how do you actually create interest around your offer? How do you filter out the grifters? How do you onboard the setters, train them, ramp them into KPI, and set the right expectations from day one? This is crucial. And how do you actually manage them? So, their schedule, their daily workflow. How do you manage that, they actually are on KPIs? How do you make sure that you keep them accountable and basically build like a good culture for them to actually, excel and actually outperform themselves? And how do you track their performance? Like, do you have a proper system in place to track every single thing that's going on in the DMs with a proper CRM that's like literally tracking everything, especially if you're running ads, everything with the setting, everything with the sales, all these kinds of things? And how do you actually keep them hungry, right? So you need a better system to actually keep them hungry, having incentives, communication, and good systems on the back end. So lock the fuck in, because I'm going to show you how to get your setter from being like this guy to being like this guy. This is what I call the Giga Chad setter process, right? So I'm going to break this down into 4 steps, and it starts with the sourcing, right? So obviously the first thing, you need to find a setter. You need to find a good setter. Where do you actually find serious setters, and how does the application process go? How do we filter through everything and basically have productive interviews so that you can feel comfortable and confident when you pick a guy that like, okay, this guy, is probably going to be performing. And then obviously everything that comes after you pick a guy. But first of all, obviously the offer details and the application. So number 1, you just need to literally give all the details about your offer. So as you can see over here, are you running ads? What's the organic looking like? What's the lead flow, show rate, close rate, average, like offer price, average cash collected? Do you have a closer on, cash collected last month? All these kinds of things. And then obviously the commission, all these kinds of things. And also certain things that you requirements. For example, fluent English, these time zones, that you need to work these time zones, for example. Do you need, what's the cash collected minimum that you need the setter to have? So basically just like an overview of the offer, super important. And then you need to make some sort of like a hiring form, because like I mentioned, the first example, most people, they just reach out to somebody like, yo, I need a setter. This is the stuff. But if you get a form, you're able to give this form to a lot of people. So if you you can just literally search up like setter coaches on IG. I'm sure you know somebody in your network. If you don't, you can also reach out to me on IG. I can connect you with some guys that we use. But you would be able to send this form to multiple people, because if you're sending this to just one person and he has a coaching program, he's going to be very biased, right? So he wants to place from his program, whereas he's not really interested necessarily in getting you the best setter. He's interested in getting you a setter from his program, because he obviously needs to place them, So this just allows you to get way more applications, right? So you ask questions about like obviously their name, age, where they're from, time zone availability, are they on any current offers, what's their experience, how much have they cash collected. You get them to send a loom of themselves explaining like their experience, why they would be a good fit, these kinds of things, right? And you can just easily filter through these, right? So at this point, you'll be getting responses. So this is an example again with our client CoSpa. We got 20 applications, right? So with 20 applications, you just have a way bigger pool to choose from. So you don't have to like get a guy on just because it's one of 2, but you have 20 different people from different programs and you can filter through them. And when you get a form like this, you're obviously going to be able to get them into a spreadsheet. And you can easily just go through and look at the looms, look at their like qualifications and everything. If they're not from the right country, if they had like a weird experience, whatever, like it doesn't add up, you can just DQ them. And the ones that you don't DQ, the next step is obviously getting them on an interview, right? So over here on the interview, you just want to be kind of detailed with what you're going through, right? So I'll show you some examples, but just keeping in mind, like if it's not a hell yes, it's generally a no, right? So you shouldn't really have this mindset of like, oh, he seems the best, like let's go with it, this guy. It's better to, kind of go through the process maybe again, get a few more guys on, because this is a very serious, I would say, commitment for somebody to join as an appointment setter, and you should take it super seriously as well. So you should get somebody on that you genuinely feel confident about, right? So paying attention to like body language, depth of their answers, the attitude, the tonality, right? Like red flags, late to meeting, having no camera on, shaky body language, whatever. Like you just want to kind of pay attention to this, right? And then going through like obviously their experience, logistical questions such as like where you're based, what's your working availability, these kinds of things, right? We also like to ask scenario questions. So this is kind of like the putting them on a spot in a way. So asking questions about like things they've had to experience, overcome challenges they've had. For example, like you're off your KPIs. What do you do to kind of get back, for the end of the week? Those kinds of things, right? Or like there are certain things that you want to ask them, right? Like lead flow is low, you're behind your targets. Like, what do you do? To kind of understand how they think and also how they're able to like come up with the answers and stuff. Obviously, you also want to get an understanding of their personal goals, because if they have a certain goal, let's say what they want to make 5K, if that's unrealistic in your current, I guess, offer, you generally don't really want to get them on, or at least you want to be upfront with those things, right? Like 5K is a little bit, much at the moment. You can probably make 3, but if you want to make 5, I just want to set the expectations right, because if they expect to make 5K and the role can only really realistically get them to maybe 3, 4K, then it's a very good chance they're going to churn, right? So you just don't really want to deal with that. And then from here, we do role plays, right? This is very key because you want to test their like actual skills and see if they're actually good. And also getting an understanding of like, are they getting coaching? Like who's the coach that they're getting coached from? These kinds of things, right? So just really doing an interview, understanding who they are as a person, their experience. Also ask them follow-up questions about like their experience, how much they've cash collected, see if there's any red flags coming up. Just kind of really doing a good deep dive essentially. And if you do this correctly, you're going to very easily see who's like not really that good of a fit versus the ones that really are a good fit, right? So from here, you should have, if you have 20 applicants and you do, let's say 3, 4, 5 interviews, you're going to get a really good understanding of like who to pick. You pick one of the best ones, the one that you vibe with the most, the one that's the best fit for the offer. And now you have a setter on, right? So that's number 1, getting like sourcing essentially. And like I said, if you need any help with like finding places to find setters, like certain coaching programs or whatever that, place setters, you can just reach out to me on IG, but you should be able to find them in your network or, on IG, whatever. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be the placement and the onboarding. So this is super important because this is where you set the expectations, you frame the offer, and you also obviously get them training, you get them onboarded, and it kind of like the first experience with the offer. So first of all, what we do is we have this setter document. And this is basically just a document where we lay out all of the details regarding the offer. So we give them like the DM script, we give them the tracking sheet, we give them even their daily workflow, which I'm going to touch on later in just a second, but we script out literally a daily workflow for the setters to use, right? So I can just show you this. It also includes like the training and also the offer worksheet. So I'll just open this up and show you. So as you can see over here, we have a video just going over everything. We have all like the different links. So we tag them with the UTM source. So if we have multiple setters on, we know, for example, if it's tagged with IGDM, Josh or Jamie or Mark, we know which setter booked in the call. And then we do the same with ads. So we know which calls actually came from ads. This is just like general, I guess, assets for the setter, like voice notes and everything, lead magnets, all these kinds of things. And then we also go into the training. So this is like the first step. When they get onboarded, we give them access to this and they have to go through this before the actual onboarding call. So the first thing is like we set the expectations, like I said. So just making sure that they understand what's actually required from them, because if you don't do this, a lot of setters might have the wrong expectation. They might have this like lazy attitude or whatever. You kind of want to set the expectation straight away and say like, yo, we're looking for somebody that's going to be hungry and have a very high level work ethic. We need you to have a above and beyond mentality. This is ultimately a sales job, right? And you can't be slacking in a sales job. You're going to be, it's going to be difficult. Like it's not going to be easy, but if you have an above and beyond mentality, that's how you're ultimately going to make money, right? Hungry to improve and learn, high standards, showing up on time, being very like detailed with your communication, being on point, not missing stuff, these kinds of things, and also having 100% commitment. Like you don't really want to get a setter on that's like offer stacking, or he's on different things, or he has 1,000 other commitments. So just keeping that in mind. And we also give them a way out, right? So at this point, if they feel like, oh shit, this might not be the best fit, or like I don't feel like I can deliver on this, like we basically tell them like, yo, let us know now, because like it's not really going to work if you don't feel aligned with these things, right? So this just goes into like a lot of detail, and as you can see here, like we will quiz you on the details of this training on the kickoff call, so make sure you take notes and you do everything, right? So this just again sets the expectation, because you want them to actually take this seriously. and kind of go through everything because it's super important, right? We go through like the core values to hold, obviously just general information, how to stay organized, how to get the Google Calendar access, team communication, system walkthrough, all these kinds of things using IG tags, PCFU tracking, which again, I'm going to get back to in the systems section. But yeah, just a bunch of stuff when it comes to setting. And then also something that's super important is kind of like what I call like paradigm shifts, right? Because a lot of setters, they have maybe what I would say like a wrong paradigm. They're trying to book in calls and they feel like when they book in a call, like their job is done. But I would actually say that a setter is, very much integrated into the sales process. So the setter should almost, look at themselves as a closer in a way, right? Because the stuff that they do in the DMs before and after they've booked somebody in is going to have a drastic impact on the actual close rate, right? So the goal of a setter is not to book in calls, but it's to get deals closed, right? That's how they make money. That's how you make money, right? So they should have this paradigm of being a closer and understanding that the way they do the DM flow, the way they do the post booking, the way they even do the follow-ups and all these kinds of things, the way they pitch the call, all these things have a huge impact on how the actual call goes, right? So just making them understand that like they're very integrated in the sales process and the job that they do is actually very important. And it's not just about booking calls, but it's actually about like getting deals across the line, right? And then just also other kinds of things like standards, KPIs of a top setter, how to change beliefs of leads, and like basically just like how to be a productive setter and, essentially what types of strategies to implement on the offer, right? So super important, training, offer. So this is the other thing. We go through, let me pull this up. We go through the offer details. So this is where we have all the details about the offer. So about the offer, about the creator, about his story, sales call recordings, the ICP, really getting the setter to understand the offer at a very high level so they can understand what is the offer, what's the deliverables, what's the features, what's the benefits, what's the ICP, what's their pain points, their goals, what's the actual story of the creator, what's the vibe of the kind of like the creator, their, their content, everything, like what's their messaging. These kinds of things are very important and you really want them to understand them. Even like client results and testimonials and case studies, like they should know with the case studies, like John went from X to Y in X amount of months without blah, 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 blah. Like they should know like the different, I guess, details around like your case studies and results, because they can use these and it's very powerful to use in the DMs, right? Like if they're talking to a lead who's an agency owner or, he's overweight, he can use a very specific example of another client who was an agency owner or he was overweight and kind of like how the program helped them specifically, right? So they can really like, I guess, persuade people with social proof if they have the social proof, right? So we even give them the sales call recordings, obviously everything on the socials, and then also like personality and lingo calibration. So giving them phrases to avoid, common lingo to use, right? So for example, if the creator doesn't say bro, or he doesn't say like, yo, what's up? Like you shouldn't use that in the DMs because it's going to come across as it's not really the actual person speaking, right? Personality traits, uniqueness, all these kinds of things to get them to really adopt, the actual personality of the person that they're going to be impersonating as the setter. And also, like I said, understanding the offer and everything like that. So they can really have like a productive time in the DMs. That's number one. So this is stuff that they go through before the actual onboarding call. They take notes. We quiz them on this stuff on the onboarding call and make sure they've actually gone through it. Because if they do, we're going to have just a way easier time getting them onboarding, getting them ramped up. Next up is obviously the actual onboarding call. So I'll show you this as well. Number one, like I said, we quiz them on the actual training essentially that they've gone through already. So like, have they seen the training? Have they studied the offer? Have they studied the creator? Do they know the KPIs? Do they understand how Discord, the CRM and report system works? Did they take notes? Like we quiz them on this stuff, right? And if they haven't done this, that's obviously a major red flag. And unless they've given you a very valid reason before the onboarding call, so they're proactive and saying like, yo, something came up, I'm not going to be able to get this done by tomorrow. Is it cool if we do the onboarding call, like basically a day after, something like that? That's proactive, right? But if they come to the onboarding call and they're like, oh, blah, 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 they have an excuse, that's a reactive, right? That's a major red flag, right? Unless they have a very valid reason and they give it to you proactively before the call, that's obviously a different thing. But if they come onto the call, they have excuses, they fumble, they don't really know the answers to the questions, they haven't taken notes, like that's a major red flag, you know. So just keeping these things in mind. Obviously, the next step is to set up the task tracker, which I'm going to show you in just a second. We schedule in 3 weekly coaching calls every single week, which I'm also going to touch on in just a second. And then we have a team call on Monday. So all these I'm going to touch on in just a second. And then obviously the next few steps to get them onboarded, go through the program of the creator, if they get access to the program, all these kinds of things, just basically getting them integrated. And the next step is obviously getting them the actual onboarding process, like getting them onboarded, getting them onto, you know, ManyChat, IG, into Discord, all these kinds of things. And keep in mind as well, like this is obviously very good because it like gives them all the details they need, but also it sets the expectation of the role, right? Like if they have such a high level of professionalism, like as the first impression of the company, it just sets the tone for the entire, I guess, working experience from them. Like they already see that the standard is super high, so they're going to obviously adopt the same as standards, right? If you have a sloppy onboarding process, like you're late to the call, you fumble, you know, you get them straight into IG, you have no onboarding like systems, it's going to be very messy, and obviously that's going to make the setter feel like, okay, it's not that serious, you know, and they're going to kind of adopt the same level of thinking. Like I said, the next thing that we also do on the onboarding call is we give them a daily workflow. So we literally script out this custom with the setter on the call, depending on their schedule and, you know, when they go to the gym, when they wake up, these kinds of things. And this is very crucial because you want the setter to know exactly what they have to do at every single time of day, right? Like you don't want a setter to wake up and be like, okay, what the hell do I do now? Maybe let me do some follow-ups and then I'll do some outbounds later, and, you know, I'll go to the gym at, you know, whatever. And, you know, they don't really have any strategy throughout the day. You want them to have a custom strategy that they can follow throughout the day so they can be very, what's the word? They can be very strategic with their time, right? Like basically productive. Productive is the word. They can have a productive day, so they can get shit done quickly and also know like the importance of things, right? So for example, the most important thing is going to be, for example, I need to send a reminder to Mark tomorrow because he have a call, right? I need to make sure he's seen the VSL. I need to make sure he has the Zoom link. I need to make sure that he's available, blah, 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 blah. That's like number one. Number two is going to be like, did I send any booking links yesterday that I need to follow up with? All these kinds of things, right? Beginning of day reports, check your daily workflow, go through the Google Calendar, see if there's any sales calls for the day, blah, 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 right? And then they go into follow-ups, follow up with anybody that didn't book in, follow up with anybody that left them on red, follow up with people that haven't replied, check over the PCFU tracker, which again, I'm going to touch on in just a second. And then obviously getting into outbounds and all these kinds of things, right? So just having like a very strategic, you know, flow for the setters to follow every single day is going to make them way more productive. Like this has been a major game changer for us because they might not admit this, but most setters, if they don't have this, they don't have any structure throughout their day, right? Like you as a business owner as well would know, like if you didn't plan out your day, like, you know, you wouldn't get shit done, right? So it's the same with the setters. And if you don't do this for them, like it's not going to get done. So we just do it for them on our morning call. And obviously we use this, you know, actively as they're setting. We pull this up on their check-in calls and everything and make sure that they're actually, you know, using it and have structure throughout their day. The next thing is going to be systems. This is crucial as well because you, again, like I said, you want to have things clean. You want to have a proper system in place so the setter feel like confident in what they have to do, and it's not messy. You know, if things are messy, if you have 100 different spreadsheets and everything is just a mess, you're texting over WhatsApp and that's it, and you don't really have like a proper, you know, system for communication and stuff. Like everything is just going to be messy, right? So you need to have proper systems in place. So with every single client that we onboard, we set up a custom Discord communication channel. So as you can see over here, we have one for setting, one for calls, one for sales, we have for content, we have for, you know, assistants, like everything. You would basically get your entire team into here, closers, setters, VAs, you know, whatever, content, you know, everybody with the content editors and stuff. So you have everything in one place and you have a like one central hub basically to systemize everything in your business. But if we're strictly talking about like the sales process with the setting and stuff, we also set up the automations, right? So every single time we book in a call, it sends an automation. So we have the UTM source. So again, we tag each setter's link with a different code basically. So this shows up, so we know, for example, this was booked by Amir because he's tagged with AS, right? And also gives all the details about the lead. We do the same with canceled calls, no-shows. Every time we get a payment, every time you have a sales call, the closer has a call report that they have to fill out. So it looks like this, right? So, who's the closer, what happened on the sales call, what's the deal size, lead quality, rate of discovery, all these things. And then also at the end of each day, the setter has to fill out a end of day report, right? So we have a beginning of day report. At the beginning of the day, they give in their goal for the day and also what the input is going to be for the day. And then at the end of the day, they basically just give an outline of what happened that day. So this is going to be how many outbounds, follow-ups, how many replies, how many qualified combos, all these, metrics. But also, stuff like what's your current win for the day? How many hours did you work? Did you send the conversation reviews? What's your performance rating? What's your actual skill rate? Like, how would you rate your performance today? These kinds of things. Just getting a very detailed overview of what they did that day. Again, having very much, structure in kind of their process, right? And then also every time they book in a call, they reply to the call with more information about the lead. This is obviously, like I said, you want the setters to be as close to the sales or the closing as possible, because you want them to understand that they have a major impact on how the calls go, right? So the more details they can give to the closer leading up to the call, the more reminders they can send to the lead, the better the pre-call flow that they take the leads through. So what they do with the lead after they've booked in. So continuing the conversation, asking follow-up questions about the stuff they put into the form, the VSL they send them, YouTube assets, these kinds of things is going to make a huge impact on the actual sale. So again, we get the setter to send a detailed overview of what happened in the conversation, have they sent the follow-ups, the reminders, all these kinds of things. So that's basically the first thing. We do the Discord thing. The next thing is the CRM. And, I've seen a lot of these different spreadsheets and stuff. In my, humble opinion, this is the best one. This is we've made this custom because I was so sick of having, 100 different spreadsheets. We had one for ads, one for sales, one for setting, one for this, one for that. And it was just a mess, right? And like I just said, if everything is a mess, nobody's going to use it. Everybody's going to hate it. And yeah, it's just going to be a mess, honestly. So we've made this where it's we have everything in one place. As you can see, we have the dashboard, we have team stats, KPIs, calls, DM setting, PCFU, which I'm going to touch on again, like I said, the VSL, ads, payments, expenses, everything in one sheet. So, everybody has access and can see everything going on basically in the sales process, right? So first of all, we have everything with the sales. We have everything with the PCFU. So this basically just means post-call follow-up, or you can even say pre-call follow-up if they haven't been on a call. This basically just means leads that are really good quality that you want to keep in the pipeline, but they didn't, let's say, close, or they didn't show, or they said something in the DMs that made them not potentially a good fit to jump on a call right this moment, but they are a really good lead and they have a very good chance of closing in the future. You want to keep these people engaged, right? You don't want these guys to slip through the cracks. A lot of times, you get a sales call, they don't close, and it's okay, that's it. You want to keep these people engaged. You want the setters to have track of these guys so they know the last point of contact, what happened, give them a lot of notes, what's the tags. So for example, this guy is waiting for funds. This guy didn't close, this guy didn't show on the follow-up call. This guy, said something in the DMs that made him not a good fit for a call today, but he's like a 7 out of 10 lead quality. He's really good. He's really potentially interested. But there's just a certain thing that, didn't align right now, but maybe in a month he can close, or maybe he can close even after the sales call with just a few DMs over the DMs with a DM close for the setter. These kinds of things are super crucial, right? Because you want everybody, all the leads in the business to have a system so you can keep them in the loop and not really, lose them. And then we have the point of next contact. So okay, follow up with this guy, let's say in a month. And then what's the thing that you're going to be doing next month? Is it you're going to pitch him or you're going to nurture him, right? So you can even nurture them. If you have a really good lead, you should, keep them in the loop, send them YouTube videos, all these kinds of things, and kind of keep them warm, right? Next thing is the DM settings. We track literally every single number with the DM setters in the CRM. So all the outbounds they do, all the inbounds they get, follow-ups for first message, follow-ups with leads that fell off in the conversation, the replies, qualified combos, pitched calls, booking links sent, qualified bookings and DQ bookings every single day with every single setter. So we know exactly what the numbers are and we can pull this up on the dashboard. we do the same with ads, right? So if you're running ads, you have follower ads on, for example, you need to understand how many followers you're getting, what's the qualified, how many of those are qualified, how many outbounds was done, how many replies, qualified combos, pitched calls, booking links sent, all these kinds of things. So I'll just pull this up and show you. So maybe you can see this because of my face, but this is basically where we have all the stats. So we have like revenue, we have all the different things for sales, everything with the DM setting, everything with the ads, the VSL, all these kinds of things, just populating, right? So basically the overall stats in the business. We also have the team stats. So, what's the numbers for closer of 1 versus closer 2? What's the, numbers for setter 1 versus setter 2? All these kinds of things. And then also the KPI calculator. So this is something we pull up on like team calls and stuff, because you want the setters to understand what is required from them specifically, right? So like I said, you want to have clarity. So if you know that the goal is going to be 100K in 30 days, the show rate is 90%, the close rate is 50, the offer price is 8K, and the average cash collected is 4. You need 25 deals, you need 56 sales calls, and that means that the KPI on a weekly basis is going to be 14 sales calls, right? And the KPIs on a day-to-day basis is going to be 1.8, so like around 2 calls a day. That's like the KPI for the setters, right? So they know exactly like what's required, and then you can also break this down in terms of like what's your reply rate, how many calls are you like, or like what's your pitch to booking rate. And you can break this down and kind of understand how many outbounds they need to do, how many follow-ups they need to do on a daily basis, right? Same with calls. We have everything inside of here with the calls, the DM setting, like I showed you, ads, the PCFU stuff. We even track like the conversion rate of the VSLs, and then obviously any payments and all these kinds of things. So we can track like literally every single number in the business, because if you don't, like, it's going to be obviously very difficult to scale if you don't really have like a proper system in place to know like literally every single number in the business. Next thing, again, coming back to having a very seamless flow with the setting, is going to be obviously a custom DM flow. Now, I don't like to call this a DM script because I don't really think that a script is the best way to do it. I think it's better to have it as a framework, right? So this is literally a framework. And as you can see, we have a lot of notes on this. We have like the different questions and like the overall flow that they should take the lead through, but it's more like a framework. So we kind of explain to the setters, like, why are we actually asking these questions? What's the kind of like meaning behind this question? So if the question doesn't fit like, line for line, they can kind of like reword the question to make it make sense in the conversation, right? Because every single conversation is different. It does completely depend on the lead, what they've said so far, all these kinds of things. So you don't really want the people or like the setters to rely on a script. You want them to understand a framework so they can like mold the framework to the leads, right? And over here we have everything like what openers to use, what's the actual DM flow. So like, the opener, get them into like their current situation, their goals, their pain, all these kinds of things. Transition into the pitch. How do you do the pitch? How do you do the post booking, right? That's the next thing. So what do you actually do after somebody books in a call? Sending them in the VSL, sending them YouTube stuff, asking them follow-up questions about the stuff they said on the form, connecting with them on a deeper level, ask them personal questions, these kinds of things, and just kind of warming them up. And then what do you do for inbound leads? So, people that are directly for coaching or, for lead magnets, whatever. How do you do follow-ups and how do you handle DM objections, right? So just literally giving them everything they need. But again, framing it as like a framework and not a script, right? Because they should be able to not really rely on a script, but understand the principles so that they can, mold the script to the leads, right? And then obviously the daily report. So every single day they get a notification. They have to fill out the beginning of their report and the end of their report. So when you have systems like this in place, it just literally makes the setting process 10 times easier, because you don't have to rely on the setter, like remembering and like the setter, doing certain things. Like, yes, of course they should, but if you have the right systems in place, it's just easy for them, right? Like they're not going to miss the end of their report if they're getting a, notification, right? Like if you have a proper tracking system, it's easy for them to fill it in, right? All these kinds of things. So that's super crucial. And then the next thing is obviously how to do the management and how to like actually build a good culture, because, most people, like at least a lot of the people I've spoken to, they don't barely even speak to their setters, right? Like they get a setter on, they barely speak to them. They don't really have any culture. It's like the setter is booking calls. It's like two different departments. Like the setter doesn't really speak with anybody else in the company. And, like unless you close the deal, they barely speak to them, right? So that's not really the best way to do it, because you need them to have a strong sense of, I guess, integration in the company, right? So you should have a really good culture. You should have a really high level of management, so they feel, they feel like they're essentially like part of the company, like they feel valued essentially. Their work feels valued. They're getting training. They're getting everything in place for them to actually excel and get to the next stage if they want to get into closing or whatever. You want to have like a proper system in place, right? So this includes like incentives, communication, culture, day-to-day management. Obviously having incentives is just like bonuses and stuff. So having things in place for them to be motivated to actually hit the goals of the company, for them to hit their goals, right? So, at a certain cash collected, you get a bonus. At a certain X amount of qualified calls, you get a bonus, right? Like what happens if we actually hit the goal of the company? Like what are we going to be, kind of like giving to you as a reward for that, in terms of what you brought to the company, these kinds of things, right? So number one that we do is we have 3 calls per week with each offer with the setters, right? So if you have multiple setters on, you can do group calls, but 3 calls per week per offer that we manage, right? So if you have a setter on, you should do like at least 2 to 3 calls per week. So we do 1 with the team, so with everybody. This means like with the offer owner, with us, with the setter, with everybody on the team, just again, to building up the culture. And this is not necessarily only business related. Like obviously you speak about business, you speak about like the KPIs and everything like that, but it's more so about like the culture, right? Like they should know the person that they're working for at a deeper level, right? Like they should crack jokes. They should like have like a good time in the company and feel like valued and everything, right? Like if you work for a guy and he barely spoke to you and you jumped on calls with him and he was only business, and it just sucks. It's like working at a job and none of your guys are friends. Like you fucking hate everybody. You're just there to close deals and you're like, fuck these guys, I'm going home. Like you're not really going to overperform, right? So if you want somebody to overperform and really like pull their weight and like be really excited about the company hitting the goals and stuff, you need to have like some sort of culture and a system for, kind of managing everybody in the company, right? So like I said, we do 1 team call a week. We also do 3, like basically check-ins, like, doing live setting with them, jumping on calls with them, reviewing conversations, understanding like kind of their goals, how they're like where their head's at, like what's been going well, what's not been going so well, how can we improve, checking over like their workflow, how's the workflow going, how's your schedule, these kinds of things, just helping them improve basically, and like setting, I guess, the foundations for, the next few days. And then we do this every few days. And in addition to this, we do daily conversation reviews. So every single day on the end of the report, the setter sends in conversations for us to review, right? And every single day we send a loom back explaining what went well in the conversation, what they can improve on, and why, certain things might be good or bad, right? So explaining why again, so they can kind of understand, not just like this is good and this is bad, but like why is this bad and why is this good and how can you improve, right? So giving them live feedback every single day on the stuff that they've done is like crucial, right? Because they're going to be able to like improve so much over such a quick or like short amount of time if you actually give them feedback every single day. So as you can see here, we're sending really detailed, like this is literally an hour of conversation to review to one setter. And as you can see, they're sending, basically conversation recordings over to us to review them. And as you can see, like they actually really appreciate the feedback because they obviously want to improve as well. So if you can give them like a very high level of, I guess, training and management, like they're going to really love it and they're going to obviously improve quickly and they're going to hit their goals, right? So as you can see here, just some feedback from the setting. So this is huge. Like if you're not really having a system in place to get these guys improved over time, right? Like they're not going to improve, at least not as much, right? And this is also why I say like, it's very crucial as well that they've invested in themselves and they're actually serious. Like if they haven't done any coaching or they're not in a program and stuff, I would actually say that's probably a red flag. Like I'll probably not hire somebody that hasn't had training. So just keep that in mind, because also if they're in a program, they're going to get training from, the coach in the program as well. Obviously, if it's a good program, that's another thing, right? Next thing, like I said, is clear KPIs. So we literally use this like on a weekly basis, just breaking down the numbers. So like I said, they know exactly the KPIs for the daily KPIs, the weekly KPIs, and in terms of like qualified calls that they need to book, right? Because this just makes it easy. Like they know like, okay, the company's goal is, 50K. when we hit 50K, I'm going to hit my goal, which is, let's say, 5K or like 4K in commission with the bonuses and incentives and stuff and that and base on top of everything. I'm going to hit my goal, right? So when we're on the calls with them, we explain like their goals, right? So if you want to make 4K, the business has to make 50K with the bonuses and base and commission and everything. That means that you're going to make 4K total. And in order for the company to hit 50K and for you to hit 4K, we need to book in an average of like 12 calls a week, or let's say 2 calls a day, or whatever the stats are, right? And they're going to understand, they're going to link like their own goal to the KPI of the business, right? So they know if they don't book in 2 calls, they're basically off track for their goal to hit, 4K a month, for example. The next thing is like culture. So like I spoke about already, we do this obviously on the calls, but also like just like having a vibe throughout the day when you're working. So something we've done, like just fun challenges, right? So for example, like I said, the KPI for the business was 2 qualified convos a day, or qualified bookings a day. So if the setter didn't book in 2, he had to do 50 push-ups. If he did book in 2, my brother did 50. And if he booked in more than 2, I did 100. Right? So just have it, like, it just makes it fun, right? Because we're like going back and forth and he's like, yo, like dropping him at 50, like it's just funny. And like these kinds of things just build up the culture. And like I said, even on the calls and everything, just asking them about like their, I guess, personal lives, like what they do, what they enjoy, like just cracking jokes and having like a good time with the setters, because they shouldn't feel like kind of like it's just a burden, like, oh, they don't want to communicate with you. Like you should have a very like open relationship with them, kind of like a friend, right? Like it should be fun for them to work, essentially. Super crucial. So this is just some examples of this. And as a result, you're going to have a setter that's like really motivated to work for you. He's going to go above and beyond, as you can see here, hitting 160 outbounds. This guy was literally setting until 5 a.m. the other day, booked in 3 calls at like 5 in the morning his time because he hadn't hit KPIs. He was setting like all night basically. And they're just going to go above and beyond, and they're going to fucking love working for you. And they're going to give you feedback like, yo, I've never, had such a dialed process before, in my entire experience as an appointment setter. And they're going to love working with you. They're going to hit their goals, and the company is going to hit their goals as a result, right? So that's the process. That's what I would say. So if you've been struggling with appointment setting, maybe you have done some of these things, I would definitely advise you to implement all of these things. And like I said, everything starts with like the sourcing, and then number 2, like the expectations you set, how the onboarding goes, how clean is the process. Then obviously everything with this, with the systems and stuff. And then at the end, the management and the culture and all these kinds of things. So that's the GigaChat setting process. I hope that helps some of you guys. And again, if you need any help with any of this, if you have any questions, if you need any help with like placement, management, whatever, shoot me a DM on IG, or you can also book in a call with me in the description if you want our help to actually implement this for you. And yeah, that's it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more breakdowns like this. And that's essentially it.